everybody, I'm Catherine Sprung and I'm going to be making Devil's Food Cake, but from the recipe from Intrepid's Navy Cake series when I recently took a trip over to Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum here in New York City and found the little recipe cards. One of them was for the Devil's Food Cake, so figured let's give it a whirl. I tried to look up some of the history, backstory, was kind of wondering myself where Devil's Food Cake name came from. I got a pretty unsatisfying answer, but basically it's just the richness and darkness of the cake in comparison to a standard typical chocolate cake. It is a little bit lighter and fluffier, which then doesn't totally make sense with the devil side of it, but regardless, it is delicious. So we're going to be making that. This recipe has been scaled down quite a bit. The original recipes were for 2 large sheet pans. So this is scaled down so that you can do more of a 9 by 13, 9 by 12 type of a size, but you can do all sorts of variations. I myself earlier made a 3 6-inch round cake. So we have a 3-layer cake, each 6 inches, and that worked really perfectly. You can also do these as cupcakes too. So it's very versatile. We'll go through the batter, which is the most important step. And then after that, you can really put it into whichever pan is most fitting to you. So let's get started. So first I have my mixer with a paddle attachment. We have our mixing bowl here outfitted with a nice little sifter, and we're just gonna go ahead and sift in all of our dry ingredients right on in. So I have 365 grams. Again, I love a scale, accurate measurements. So 365 grams of white granulated sugar, just going right in. Typically you don't really need to sift that. The granules are not going to get any smaller, but we're throwing it in. Let's add it to the party, why not? Then we have some all-purpose flour. I have 305 grams of that. I also have 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda and 1.5 teaspoons of salt. So that is going in as well. All right, we're gonna sift that first and then add the cocoa just so there's not too much happening all at once. All right, then I have 71 grams of cocoa. I used a Dutch cocoa. I would recommend that. It has a nice depth of flavor to it. So for baking, that's usually my go-to. Okay, once we have all of our sifted ingredients in there, we're just gonna give it a few rotations just to make sure everything's nice and incorporated. Okay, looks beautiful. So now we're going to add in shortening. I have 157 grams of shortening. So we're just gonna add that in. And then I have 117 grams of water going in. Okay, so as you can see, our mixture is quite thick. It almost kind of resembles here like a cookie dough. So we gotta make it more cake-like. So we're going to add in 4 beaten eggs. I used room temperature eggs and then just beat them up. Nobody was harmed. And then we're gonna add those right in. Okay, so it's starting to look way more cake-like. This is good, we're getting there. We're going to add in a couple more wet ingredients. I have 11 grams of white vinegar and then 76 grams of water going in. And then we're going to add also 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And then we're just going to mix that in to incorporate. So our batter is ready. Looks beautiful, the consistency, smells super chocolatey. So we have an oven preheated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, depending on what you want to put your cake batter into, whether it's something of a similar size to a 9x12, you may want to start at about 30 minutes and check in on the cake. I used personally 3 6-inch cake grounds that look like this. So 3 of these, and that was about 35 minutes. So perhaps the 9x12 would be a similar situation, but depending on your oven, just do a toothpick check and then you can move up in increments a few more minutes here and there to bake it off. If you do cupcakes, you'll want to start a lot smaller on the scale, so probably around 15 minutes, maybe even 12, and then just keep checking on them to make sure. For any pan that's smaller like this, I recommend just filling it up halfway. Do not fill it because that batter will pour over. So start halfway, the cake will rise, especially this one with more baking soda in there, it's gonna lift it more. So start conservatively, you will thank me later. And so earlier I made the cake and I did a chocolate American buttercream, which is the simplest of buttercreams. So for that, you can typically do 1 stick of butter. I recommend, if you're doing a completely frosted cake, doubling that just so that you have enough for the inside layers as well as your outside. So for 1 batch, you can do a 1/2 stick of butter of your choice, and then about 2 cups of sifted confectioner sugar, and then maybe 1 or 2 tablespoons of milk of your choice just to get it a bit smoother. Again, if you want to make that chocolate, you can just add in some cocoa powder to your taste. That's a super easy recipe. You can do a Swiss meringue buttercream if you're feeling a bit fancy, but you can really do whatever you'd like. Typically, a devil's food cake does have either a vanilla or a chocolate frosting, but have fun, get creative in the kitchen and do what makes you happy. So you can see how I assembled my cake, doing the layers of that buttercream. I also added a little bit of a Swiss meringue buttercream in the center just to jazz things up, totally optional. So as you can see, the cake batter was super easy to make. It's super rich and chocolatey. It is very delicious, so well done, Intrepid bakers. You did a great job. And this is the scaled down version. Of course, I hope you enjoyed this video, making the recipe at home, however you choose to do it, and I'll catch you guys next time.